Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today, because it's the 20th anniversary of the first X-Men movie, I thought it was kind of a good idea to because the Fox X-Men franchise has ended, to kind of do like a retrospect of that, because again, that entire franchise started over 20 years ago, and it ended just last year. Actually, I shouldn't say it ended because technically New Mutants still has to come out, which is coming out, I believe, August 28th is the new release date for it. So that will be the last film in the Fox X-Men franchise. So it's kind of an interesting time with the 20-year anniversary to look back on that whole film series and just kind of not dissect it, but kind of go over the good and the bad, and some of the things that I really enjoyed about the movies, because I do like the comic books as well, and I really did like the animated series in the '90s when I was a kid. And even X-Men Evolution and stuff a little bit later on, and some other stuff. I remember Wolverine and the X-Men a little bit before that got canceled. But going back to the live action films, and I'm going to go over all of them. I'm going to go over the Wolverine ones, the Deadpool ones, the whole spiel. But let's go back to the first one. Let's go back to X-Men in 2000. And first of all, I want to say all the really good things about this movie. Now, this was directed by Bryan Singer, which I don't have much good things to say about Bryan Singer. But he did make a good movie with this one and with the follow-up X2. But the first X-Men did something that I think a lot of superhero movies kind of forgot later on. And that was, the audience doesn't necessarily want to see a lead-up movie. And I don't think, a lot of people say the first X-Men film is a lead-up film. I don't necessarily think it's a lead-up film. I think it does set up a good sequel, but I don't think it's a lead-up film. I think it's a lot like A New Hope in that sense, where it can stand on its own. It doesn't need the crutch of its sequels to become good. I think that original one is good enough, and I think that there's a lot of really good moments in there. Now, the first thing I'll say that's really good about it is the cast. Obviously, you had Hugh Jackman coming in, who was a complete unknown at the time, to go and play Wolverine. He's the longest lasting. He's the most recognizable. Then you also had James Marsden, who played Cyclops. You had Halle Berry, who was, again, a hot commodity at the time. She would be a Bond girl a couple years later, and Monsters Ball, Oscars, stuff like that. This was a little bit before that, so they kind of hooked her into this before she got really big and demanded a huge price tag, which kind of lucked out for them. And then you had Famke Janssen coming in as Jean Grey, who, again, very good character to add to that fold. You had Charles Xavier, who was played by the completely awesome and classically trained Patrick Stewart. And on the opposite side, you had Ian McKellen, who was playing Magneto. Again, another classically trained actor. People that could bring believability to these roles. Now, you did have some throwaway characters in there. You had Toad, who was basically a throwaway character. I don't even remember who played him. You had Sabretooth, again, who had a few moments in there, especially at the end. But again, he doesn't show up really again until much later on in the franchise. He was just kind of a big name to incorporate. Mystique was really the one that stuck around after that. And I believe that was Rebecca Romaine Stamos, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head. But that actress did a great job, especially with the makeup applications. And I do like the look that they gave to Mystique in those films, both to the actress there and then to Jennifer Lawrence later on. Not just because the costume is very revealing, but because it did accentuate a lot of what Mystique could do, because she could just, make clothes over her body if she wanted to, and they show that she can do that, but she chooses not to, because she chooses to show her entire body to show that she is beautiful, and that's something that they explain later on, but it's a cool visual in that first film. Now, I like the story. The CGI has not aged particularly well, especially for that first one. The only thing I will say that I kind of hate about the first one is the costumes, for the most part. Again, minus Mystique and maybe Magneto and Professor Xavier, because theirs are kind of almost spot on. But everybody else, Wolverine, you need to get him at least in the brown and gold or something like that. You could have. The Storm costume was kind of faithful, but again, you don't have the white colors like they did in the 90s cartoon. You don't have kind of any of the classic looks, really. A little bit of kind of that classic 80s look, early 80s, late 70s. And then you move on down the line. You had Rogue in that film as well. And again, the actress is slipping my mind, but I know her name, Anna Paquin. But she, again, she played a great role in that, which Rogue was kind of a wild card in that movie. A lot of people didn't really know how she would fit in, given that a lot of the other actors were a lot older and playing older mutants. Um, but like I said, the costumes are really kind of the drawback, I would say, with that film, and that's really the only drawback that I would give to it, aside from, again, some of the special effects limitations of the time. But that's kind of all I want to say about the first X-Men, because now we're going to go into what is the superior of the two films, which is X2, X-Men United. Now, it has a better story, it has a better villain, or it has more villains, I should say, because you have, you got Lady Deathstrike who comes in, again, great fight there at the end between her and Wolverine, which is I think is what everybody wanted to see. And then at the end of it, you have the setup for the Dark Phoenix saga with Jean Grey getting, having the water kind of come in on her, and everybody kind of thinks that she drowned, but she didn't. So they have that kind of, it has a great cliffhanger ending, and I like the stuff that they go into with Wolverine. Unfortunately, it does kind of become the Wolverine show a little bit at this point, where he's basically kind of the main character and everybody else sort of falls to the wayside somewhat. But again, I really like Wolverine, so that's really not too much of a problem with me. But for me, but a lot of other characters don't get their time to shine, and I think that's again something they kind of fixed with later films to an extent. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about X2. They still brought back those ugly as sin leather costumes, but aside from that, again, it did a really good job. They introduced mutants like Nightcrawler, who had great special effects attached to him. You introduce Iceman in that, Pyro. I'm trying to think. There were a few other ones that got introduced in that as well. But those were some of the major ones. But I think that X2 did a really good job at kind of portraying the younger mutants, because we'd already seen the older ones. Colossus, too. I forgot Colossus was also in that. But we kind of learned about the older ones in the first movie, so now we kind of get to introduce to these younger characters, and I like that because it shows that it is a school. It's not just, a boarding house for all these superheroes that just kind of sit around and murder stuff on occasion. It's an actual school where Professor Xavier teaches these kids how to use their powers. And I think that was key to that movie, is introducing that idea. Now we move on to kind of the low period in the X-Men movies, with X-Men The Last Stand. Now that was from 2006. And X-Men The Last Stand was kind of the downfall of that first series of X-Men films. And that was, again, it was supposed to be the interpretation of the Dark Phoenix saga. This is also the first film in the series up to that point that I don't believe was directed by Bryan Singer. I know that Simon Kinberg, who directed Dark Phoenix, did the script for that, I believe, or the story treatments. And again, they decided to hire him back for Dark Phoenix for some godforsaken reason. Again, you have the same cast coming back, so you do have good acting attached to this. You have Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and you got the introduction of some fun little characters like Multiple Man, and Leech and Juggernaut. Juggernaut in this movie is just, they did a better job with him in Deadpool 2 by a million. He is not anywhere close to being what he should be in X-Men The Last Stand, so I will say that. Multiple Man was a fun one, I will admit that. His powers are kind of fun to play around with. I wish he had stuck around longer. I wish Nightcrawler had come back in this film, because again, he was really good in the previous movie. But it's the same kind of deal. Magneto's the villain. Jean Grey has come back, but she's not in control of her powers. They start killing off excuse me, they start killing off people at random, because there's 3 major X-Men from the series that die in this movie. You have Jean Grey, who dies at the end when Wolverine stabs her, and then Jean Grey also kills Cyclops for whatever reason, and she kills Professor Xavier. Again, because she seems to think that he's the cause of her problems. And again, the problems of this movie would manifest themselves again later when they tried to redo that movie. Even though I think that they did some things maybe a little bit better, I think ultimately when they tried to do the movie again, they actually did it worse, which I didn't even understand how that was possible. But X-Men The Last Stand, I don't really care for that much. Again, they brought back those ugly as sin leather costumes, and half the time Wolverine's running around in a wife beater. I fucking hate that. I will say that until the end of time. It is a travesty that Hugh Jackman did not get to wear any form of the comic book version of Wolverine's costume on screen, because that comic book costume is badass, and they had the balls to tease that at the end of the Wolverine, and then nothing ever came of it. Again, it was in a deleted scene, but still. Um, I'm probably going to be venting about Wolverine's costume for half of this video. But then we go into, now we have kind of the spin-offs, or the spin-off section, because those were the main three, the original three films as part of that first trilogy. And then they went into X-Men Origins Wolverine, because Hugh Jackman was the most popular character in the series, obviously. X-Men Origins Wolverine, the game, was actually better than the movie. They totally messed up Deadpool. This is actually the birth of Deadpool, too, in the Marvel Universe, which is kind of sad in a little bit of a way, where Ryan Reynolds is playing the character of Wade Wilson in this film, but they basically just butcher him to hell, and they sew his mouth shut at the end, which is kind of like a big middle finger to Deadpool fans, because he's just supposed to talk. And again, they do this as a funny thing in Deadpool 2 when they go back in time and fuck with shit, but X-Men Origins Wolverine introduced some newer characters. I don't mind Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth. They manipulated the X-Men Origins Wolverine comic book, or Origins of Wolverine. I forget exactly what the name of it was, but they manipulated that quite a bit. And because I don't think Wolverine's adopted brother, or Wolverine's brother, was originally Sabretooth. I think it was somebody else, and then but he was similar to Sabretooth. But this one, they just make him Sabretooth, and they kind of introduce a lot of throwaway characters in this that just wind up getting killed off. They introduced Gambit in this, who's played by, I think, Taylor Kitsch, which his career went down the drain not long after this, because this is before John Connor, not John Connor, John Carter. John Carter of Mars was the Disney movie. But he played Gambit in this. There was a character called Wraith. I can't remember who plays him. You also had the Blob, the big burly, which again, that was another one that was kind of weird, like why he didn't come up in any other media before this or after this. If you're going to go to kind of random villains like Multiple Man, who don't really, they show up a fair amount in the comic books, but Blob was I think he was a core member of the Brotherhood of Mutants near the beginning. So it's kind of weird to see him in this. And then, like I said, you have the stuff with Deadpool. You have the stuff with Wolverine's backstory, which is kind of weird. The stuff with young General Stryker, who was played by Brian Cox in X2, and then he's played, I forget who plays him in Origins, but it's a younger actor. But again, the movie is subpar. The CGI is god awful in this film. It is terrible. The only really good scenes in this movie are when Wolverine goes on his rampage after they inject him with adamantium, and that doesn't even make any sense, because they inject him with adamantium, and then they after they see that the procedure worked, they're like, okay, kill him now. It's like, you just injected him with adamantium to make him indestructible, and you're gonna try and kill him. You put molten metal into his fucking body, and now you're gonna try and kill him. That is dumb written all over it. That is so stupid. Okay, and that's also where they get the tie into the Alkali Lake project and all this other stupid shit. That was done better in X2. But that was X-Men Origins Wolverine. That is easily the low point of the X-Men franchise until the very end, basically. There's those two movies, Last Stand and Origins. But now we go into First Class. And First Class was it was a fresh start type of thing. And this is where, like I said before, they started going away from the Wolverine formula a little bit. He was in his own films at the time, so they could do what they wanted to do, and they decided to kind of do a soft reboot of the franchise. Now, First Class is basically supposed to be the origin story of the original team of X-Men. So they explain that the team that Xavier has in the original X-Men film from 2000 is actually a few, like, kind of like his second team almost. They kind of come in a little bit later in these reboot movies. But his first team consists of a lot of kind of random mutants. A few well-known ones and a few random ones. Actually, I did forget to mention too. Beast. Nicholas Hoult plays Beast in this movie, and he also continues to play him in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. Probably just because he was contractually obligated to do it. But I like Beast in this movie. I actually like him, other than Kelsey Grammer's portrayal in Last Stand, which is one of the bright spots of that film. I think Kelsey Grammer was the perfect actor to get to play him. I think he was absolutely perfect to get to play him because Beast is literally like an animal version of Frasier. It makes sense. But X-Men First Class, that Beast, I liked the makeup by the end of the film because at first he starts out like regular Beast, the original Beast, where he kind of looks like a person, but he has like these hands for feet. And then he injects himself with some stuff that was made from Mystique's blood to try and cure himself, and he turns into a blue fuzzy monkey thing. Which I think he should have stayed instead of, all the CGI back and forth stuff with Nicholas Hoult in the next few films. And I don't really like his design in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. So that's a really bright spot. I like that. I like Jennifer Lawrence coming in as Mystique. I think she has the right attitude for it. I really do like Jennifer Lawrence in this role, even though she's kind of a psychopath in real life. Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy as Magneto and Xavier, respectively, do amazing jobs, even though they look nothing like Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. And then you have kind of the random ones. You have Banshee, who's in this. You have the villains are Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw, which makes sense. You haven't had Shaw in there or the Hellfire Club, so it kind of made sense to kind of invite those people in. And I like the way that they portrayed Shaw's powers, and the fact that he's portrayed by Kevin Bacon doesn't hurt either, because Kevin Bacon is a relatively good actor. I think January Jones played Emma Frost in it. She also does a very good job, too. She was introduced in X-Men Origins Wolverine with another actress that made absolutely no sense. And then you also have, like I said, you had Banshee, you have Pixie, which is another one that really never showed up again. She gets killed off in between movies. And then Havoc as well, who you really don't see very much until a couple movies later. Other than this film. But it is interesting to see the starts of the Xavier School. It's interesting to see a young Charles Xavier before he was crippled and see how he got crippled. I think it's kind of a little bit of an ingenious idea to intertwine the X-Men with stuff that was going on at the time, like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because I think this is supposed to take place in 1961. So, again, all makes sense. I like the dynamic between the characters, even though not all of them are well-known characters. You do have a Hugh Jackman cameo in there, which is kind of funny, where he just tells Charles Xavier to go fuck himself. So, again, I thought that was funny, and I thought that this early Xavier was fun. I like young Charles Xavier because he hasn't evolved to that point where he's kind of a know-it-all asshole yet. He's really a fun guy. I mean, the opening scene with him is him getting drunk and trying to get laid by talking to a girl that has two different colored eyes, talking to her about genetics, which is kind of funny. But I really like First Class. I think it started something good, and I think ultimately it stayed good with the X-Men franchise until you started going back into old tropes, and I'll explain that later. Now, the next one we have is the Wolverine with Hugh Jackman. Now, this one was the correction from X-Men Origins. Now, this is James Mangold, who was coming off of... he had won Oscars before this. He had won an Oscar for Walk the Line with Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon. Great Johnny Cash biopic. And now he comes and does the Wolverine, which is basically about Logan's time in Japan. And I love this movie. I wish it had been rated R. The only thing that I don't like about the movie is the ending. But again, he kind of fixes that with Logan later on when he does that movie. But the Wolverine really did something for that character that X-Men Origins Wolverine essentially buried him. It buried that character. The Wolverine resurrected him in an amazing way, and Hugh Jackman got horrifyingly ripped for that movie. Like, he was scary big. And apparently he actually trained with The Rock for that, I believe. So, I mean, that's just amazing. That he was able to get to the point where he looked like that, where he literally looked like Wolverine. from a comic book. And the kind of stuff that they do in that, really, again, I understand the reason why it's kind of an old trope in the comic books now, but they hadn't really done it up to this point in the movies, was removing Wolverine's healing factor, which again makes him basically mortal or somewhat mortal to normal wounds. He doesn't heal as fast, but he still heals faster than a normal person would. He gets shot a bunch of times, and then they just rip the bullets out, and he heals over in like a week or something. But I mean, it has some funny moments. It has some good moments. The love story is very clunky to me. It feels very clunky. I do like the opening of it, though, actually, where they have the atomic bomb at Nagasaki and Wolverine saves the Silver Samurai's life. I thought that was a really good part of the movie, and it was a good setup for what would happen eventually. And I like the fact that Wolverine is still trying to continue on after Jean Grey's death, and he's basically gone into self-isolation at the beginning of this film. And I like that. I like that idea that it's kind of like when they do, even though this would kind of be redone with Logan, the idea of, old man Logan, that kind of an idea where basically, in that comic book, Wolverine gets tricked into murdering the X-Men by Mysterio, and after he kills all of his friends, he symbolically kills himself because he can't actually kill himself, pretty much, or he can't figure out how to kill himself. So he just lays his head down on some train tracks and lets a train just barrel over his adamantium skull. In reality, he probably derailed a train. But that was his symbolic death of Wolverine. And that's kind of what he's in at the beginning of this movie, because he can't really come to terms with the fact that he murdered the woman he loved, and he keeps seeing her in his dreams. And I thought that was a very, very good thing, is to kind of blur the reality between dreams and what's actually happening, because it happens a few other times during the movie, because Lady Viper is the other villain in this film. And I like what they did with her, too, with the snake stuff. It's kind of interesting. But also the Yukio character in this is very good as well, as is the various other characters that play in this. I love the fight scene between the son of Silver Samurai and Wolverine close to the third act of the film. And he does an amazing job. And this is right after Wolverine just got his healing factor back, and he's just ready to fuck people up. It's amazing. And there's one of the best lines where the samurai looks at him and he says, "What are you?" He says, "I'm the Wolverine." And then he puts the claws through his neck and kills him, and then lets him drop. Because the only thing that I will say is that the third act of this film is a letdown. For two reasons. First of all, there's a scene where Logan is basically assaulted by a bunch of ninja. It's like, you have a prime opportunity to watch Wolverine rip ninjas limb from limb, and you glaze over it. That is a travesty in and of itself. And then the stuff that they did to Silver Samurai was just stupid, where they gave him like a giant adamantium mech suit. Like, if you just gave him an adamantium sword that did the things that the mech suit did, and you made him young again, that would make sense, because he was a military officer. He knows how to fight. So again, that makes sense. But I'm not going to harp on this movie too much, even though I really do love it. I'm going to go into another movie that I really love, actually, which is X-Men Days of Future Past. Now, again, they kind of fell into the same tropes as this, and this is Bryan Singer coming back to direct again. So it kind of makes sense that they returned to some older tropes. But it turns back into the Wolverine show. Now, in the original Days of Future Past, it was in the comic books. Basically, what happened is Kitty Pryde got her mind sent back in time to the old age of the X-Men to try and stop the Sentinels from coming about and ultimately enslaving the human race and eradicating mutants and killing most of the X-Men. And when we do that, in the comic book, they switch between present day and the future, or what the future is currently, so that they can try and change it. And you basically get to see a bunch of the X-Men, the remaining X-Men, get murdered, while the ones in the past are trying to, fix things. And this is the same, and this is the movie that kind of was the passing of the torch, symbolically, is because you had the old X-Men cast, you had, all the guys from the old one, you had Iceman, you had Iceman, you had I don't think Cyclops was in this. No, you didn't have Cyclops. So Cyclops and Jean Grey weren't in this because they would have been dead by then. But you had Iceman, you had Colossus, you had Storm, you had Magneto, you had Charles Xavier, you had Kitty Pryde. Also, I forgot about Kitty Pryde too, who was played by Ellen Page. That one I kind of glazed over a little bit. You had Pyro, who I think was getting played by another actress. Rogue was actually in one of the cuts before she was removed for the final theatrical cut. Um, and then you had Halle Berry coming back as Storm too. So you had all the old cast, and then you had all these new players that were coming in, like Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy and all these other people that came in. So it was a good passing of the torch movie. The only thing I will say about this movie, and this is kind of something that has happened over the course of time with some of these X-Men movies, is the one thing you want to see in the movie is never happens. The one thing I wanted to see when I saw this movie, and I saw that it was about Wolverine, or that Wolverine was one of the main characters in it, because he's the one that gets sent back in time instead of Kitty Pryde, which, don't ask me how that makes sense. But I wanted to see Wolverine ripping apart Sentinels with his claws, and that would have been amazing, but that's like the one thing that we don't see, and then Magneto just kind of takes him out at the end of the film. You had some good stuff in there. You had the Quicksilver scene, which was amazing. You have some of the stuff with James McAvoy, which, I mean, they're kind of trying to portray him as like a heroin addict, basically, but they're not saying it. He's basically portrayed as a drug addict because he has to take this special drug that allows him to walk, but it also negates his like mental powers, so it basically makes him a normal human, which I think is kind of weird and interesting. And he's basically closed his school because of the depression that he has from being crippled. And he's basically just a lowly, human at that point. And even Patrick Stewart says he was a very different person at that point in time than he was later on when Logan met him originally. But again, I like the movie. Jennifer Lawrence has a great job in it. Michael Fassbender does amazing in it because now he's actually Magneto. He's not just a guy who can move metal stuff. Like, he lifts a stadium in that movie. So he's actually Magneto at that point. But I love that movie, and then that movie then leads us into the next phase of X-Men spinoffs, which is the Deadpool film. Now, I love the first Deadpool. The first Deadpool is probably my favorite film out of any of the X-Men films or spinoffs, and Ryan Reynolds is fucking hilarious in that film. Every single scene in that film, originally when I watched it, had me dying laughing, because of all the shit that I could just tell was ad-libbed by him and TJ Miller and everybody else on that. They just put as many funny people in there as they could, and they just let them go nuts. And I love the fact that they actually include the scene that was the test footage that got leaked because Ryan Reynolds wanted to make that movie. And I credit him. That is an amazing movie, and it's great, and I cannot say enough good things about it. It is fucking hilarious. Here's the thing. I can't name too much stuff about it because it's really just, the one thing that it was trying to do was be really funny and really action-packed and really gory, and it did all of those things. The guy that plays Colossus, who they did as CGI Colossus for this, he did a great job. Obviously, Reynolds did a great job. I like TJ Miller in the film. I think he did a funny job. Ed Skrein, who plays Ajax, he does an amazing job in the film as well. Gina Carano, who's in this, who's an early role for her, she does a good job. So everybody did an amazing job with this film, and it felt like it was a labor of love when this film came out because of all the stuff that we knew that happened with it and how hard they had to fight to get this thing off the ground, because this thing was in development since X-Men Origins Wolverine in 2009. But to skip past that, again, I could go on for hours just about Deadpool, especially the costume. The costume is amazing. But going into the next one, this is when we kind of start the sputtering a little bit of the X-Men franchise, and this is X-Men Apocalypse. Now, X-Men Apocalypse was teased at the end of X-Men Days of Future Past, where you get to see Apocalypse forming the pyramids, and that was supposed to be the big thing, is Apocalypse is going to be the next big villain. He hadn't appeared in a live-action X-Men film up to that point. And Oscar Isaac was coming in to play him as well, who had just come off of Star Wars The Force Awakens the year before. So he was a big commodity at the time. So he comes in. You have Olivia Munn coming in as Psylocke. You had somebody else who was recast as Angel. You had Michael Fassbender coming back as Magneto. James McAvoy coming back as Professor X, Beast, all the casting characters. I believe for that movie as well, you had Jubilee coming in for the first time. This was also the first movie where you had some of the younger X-Men cast coming in, like Cyclops and Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler coming in a lot earlier than he did in the original series of films. So you had a lot of people that were in there, and then on the end of the film, you get to kind of see them all in their, classic costumes, and Quicksilver as well, coming back from the previous film. So you had a lot of good talent there, but the problem is the story is very convoluted. A lot of the characters don't get developed very well. A lot of them are killed off, and kind of unceremoniously, like Angel. And a lot of the characters, they wanted to make Archangel this. That's the problem, is that Angel had a whole character arc before this, and nobody ever really explored it. He showed up in X-Men: The Last Stand, but he barely had any part in it. He just had a couple little scenes at the beginning and near the end, basically. And in the original comic, if I remember correctly, Sabretooth rips his wings off, and then Apocalypse gives him new mechanical wings, and that's how he becomes Archangel. But in this, I think he just, because he has the wings, and then Apocalypse turns them into metal wings, which I think is kind of weird. But basically, this movie was kind of, it was a whole clusterfuck just from the start. The stuff that Olivia Munn has said about the production is horrible and insane. This was the start of the downfall of the X-Men franchise, truly. But next you go into Logan, which was the year after that. Now, Logan is a masterpiece. James Mangold knows how to do Wolverine. And I will never, ever, ever probably see a Wolverine movie that I will love as much as Logan, because Logan is the only X-Men film that I've ever watched and cried at the end, because that movie is so amazing in the way that it portrays Logan as a character, and it's rated R. And we can thank Deadpool for that. It's rated R, and that is how Wolverine should be done. You see him putting claws through people's heads. And also Patrick Stewart in the movie as well. And I can't remember the little girl that plays X-23, but she does an amazing job as well. But Hugh Jackman, this was his love letter to Wolverine, and this was James Mangold's love letter to Wolverine. And I think it was a very fitting way for Hugh Jackman to go out, except that he never wears the fucking costume. And I know I came back to that, but it's the one thing that disappoints me about this series, is that he never got the chance to wear that, either the yellow and powder blue, or the brown and gold, or even the X-Force black and gray costume, or any of that shit. I thought that was a travesty, but at the same time, this movie is amazing. I love it's bittersweet, it's sad, but it makes you smile, because these are characters that you've known for so long, and you get to go on one last ride with them, and you get to go on this little journey, and it's kind of, in reality it's kind of like a road trip movie a little bit. But it's kind of like Wolverine, his healing factor isn't working right. He's not healing as well as he should. And he hasn't popped his claws in a while, and there's a lot going on here. It's a partial adaptation of Old Man Logan, but obviously they couldn't use all the elements because they didn't have the rights to some of those characters. But I really, really enjoyed it. I think that Patrick Stewart playing an aging and kind of mentally unstable Professor X was a good addition to that cast, and that Wolverine is kind of staying around to take care of him as his old friend is both sad and understandable, because of how much Xavier helped him to regain his memories, and to interact with other people again, and reintroduce him into a society instead of ostracizing him. So I really like that aspect of the film, and then the action scenes are amazing, especially that final set piece. That final set piece where he just murders the shit out of everything is amazing. But like I said, I love Logan. I can't say enough good things about it. And James Mangold is the master of Wolverine. I don't think I will ever see a film that is as good about Wolverine as Logan was. And I doubt I will ever see a film about Wolverine that is close to Logan, because Disney now owns the character. So we're not going to see a rated R Wolverine outing anytime soon, probably. Now, the next one we go into is kind of the meh, which is Deadpool 2. Now, I do like Deadpool 2. I think it had some funny gags in it. I think that a lot of it worked. I think they went a lot more hardcore with the comic stuff. I like the inclusion of Domino and Cable, who's played by ZZ Beetz and Josh Brolin, respectively. So I like both of those characters, even though they did race swap Domino. It's whatever, it's fine. I don't really have too much of an issue with it, but because she still kind of acts like Domino, so it's not really that bad to me. But a lot of the characters in it that are kind of throwaway, like Shatterstar, they're kind of cool in the comics. So it's kind of sad to see, like, Shatterstar, I think gets caught up in like a helicopter blade or something at the beginning of that movie. But I like Cable. I like Deadpool. Obviously, Ryan Reynolds coming back to play Deadpool. The kid in this movie is the most annoying little shit I have ever seen in my life. The movie should have been about Wade and Vanessa. And Vanessa is supposed to be playing Lady Death. That's the whole thing they're going for. Is she's supposed to be Lady Death, because in the comic books, Deadpool falls in love with Lady Death, but he can't kill himself to be with her because of his healing factor. So it makes sense, but she's basically taking the place of that character in this story, which again I kind of understand, but I don't like the fact that you included this whole subplot about Deadpool has to do this because this kid winds up doing something, or he could do something. He has to invest in this kid for whatever reason because Vanessa tells him to. It's like, okay, no, just let Deadpool be Deadpool. Don't include the kid. Don't include any of this bullshit, because the kid's annoying too. I hate the kid in the movie. And I don't think that because he's a bad actor. I don't think that. I think just because the direction and the script makes him annoying. If you want that kid to be good for this movie, you need to make that kid likable, and he wasn't likable. Domino was kind of pedestrian. The action scenes with her were amazing, though, and the stuff they did with Juggernaut was amazing. I will say that. The stuff with Colossus was pretty funny, along with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and like I said, Cable I thought did a really good job. Josh Brolin got jacked for this movie. He got really jacked, and this was also at the same point where he was doing Thanos for Infinity War and Endgame. So he was balancing out two Marvel roles at the same time, including obviously this one that required a lot of physical preparation. So, like I said, I give Deadpool props for some of the things that it did well, but at the same time, it probably did an equal amount of things bad. And now we get to the train wreck that is Dark Phoenix. And Dark Phoenix, this thing was doomed to fail from the beginning. I've been over this in videos before. This film was went into production not long after the Fox Disney buyout was put through, but well before it was finalized, because it took over a year for that whole thing to get officially finalized, or maybe 18 months, something like that. And during that time was when this film was in production, and for some reason Fox decided they wanted to give it to Simon Kinberg as his first directorial film, even though he royally fucked up on The Last Stand 10 years prior, or more than 10 years prior. So this movie was doomed to fail from the start. It has a good cast of young actors, but again, at the same time, it's a pedestrian story. It's a story we knew was going to end the X-Men franchise, and all we saw during the production of this thing was, this thing looks like crap, this thing looks like crap, this thing looks like crap, and lo and behold, it comes out and it's crap. So the X-Men franchise unfortunately died with a whimper, at least from that front. But that's kind of the retrospective of everything. I'm not going to go into New Mutants because I've gone into that a million times over. I'll do a review of it when it comes out in August, but aside from that, I'm not touching the thing. But that's the X-Men franchise kind of reviewed in a nutshell, if you want to look at it that way. But like I said, I really love some of these movies, but some of them just kind of rub me the wrong way a little bit. But I want to know what you think. What's your favorite Fox X-Men movie? Do you really enjoy, some of the spin-offs more than the main series? Are you more of a Deadpool person, more of a Wolverine person, more of a main X-Men person? Or do you not care? Do you not like it? Are you excited to see what Marvel does with the properties? Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to listen to them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?